Hello everybody and welcome into a brand new episode of Press Any Button to Continue. My name is Naoise and today's episode is going to be quite different to our usual style of episode. So at the moment Keith is on holidays over in Japan and he's going to be away for a couple of weeks, and instead of taking a break from the podcast we decided that I would take the reins and keep the show going and do an episode on my own. So this is my first ever solo episode. I've never done a podcast on my own. So I'm looking forward to doing this, and what I've done is I've put some questions out there for our listeners to ask, gaming related, not gaming related. They can ask me anything, and I got a good few responses in, so I'm going to be responding to or reading out the listener questions today, so hopefully it'll be fun. And again, say if this is your first ever episode of Press Any Button to Continue, just bear in mind it is totally different. It's usually myself and my beautiful co-host Keith, hand in hand, virtually hand in hand anyway. And we talk about retro video games, nostalgia, all that kind of good stuff. But today I'm flying solo, and just to keep flying the flag of Press Any Button to Continue until Keith makes his triumphant return. And I can't wait to hear about his trip over in Japan. And he was actually sending me some photographs of a video game shop that he was in, and there was like beautifully boxed Game Boy Color games, beautiful boxed Nintendo NES or Famicom games, and it looks really, really cool. So I hope he has a great time over there, and I can't wait for him to come back and to hear all his cool stories. But again, in the meantime, what I've done is I have proposed some questions to our listeners, and we got some cool ones in. We got some very interesting questions in, so I'm going to read them today and hopefully you enjoy the episode. So the first question that I got asked on Instagram at Harry K Wanders, and Harry is actually going to be a guest on the podcast very, very soon. So when Keith comes back, myself and Keith are going to be having a conversation with Harry, and we're going to be talking about retro video game magazines, which I think would be a really, really cool episode to do, because magazines are, it's a really, it's really nostalgic to read over retro video game magazines, even to when you get down to like the back of the magazines where there's the old ads when you could text in to get like a screensaver on your Nokia 3310 or whatever old brick phone you used to have. So I'm really looking forward to having Harry on the podcast. But Harry has asked, what's your most memorable gaming moment? And that is a tough one, because usually for me the most memorable moments are when I complete a game. So when I finish a game, I do remember playing Final Fantasy 13, and there was a cutscene on the bridge, and I remember seeing it and thinking, whoa, this is one of the most impressive cutscenes ever. It's like a battle cutscene where they're all kind of running towards an enemy, and the scene itself just kind of blew me away. I was like, whoa, this is absolutely incredible. A visually stunning scene. That was one really big moment. Completing Super Mario Bros. 3 was another huge moment for me, because it's one of my favourite video games of all time. I, as a kid, played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of it, but I never ever remember completing it, and I completed it for the first time about a couple of years ago, within the last, like, say 2 or 3 years, and really, really enjoyed it. A really, really cool game to play, a lot of fun. Finally getting to the end, and that was one of those moments. And then if I think of possibly the biggest moment for me, possibly the most memorable, was when I finally, after 20 years maybe, completed the Pokédex in Pokemon Yellow. So I've been a big Pokemon fan ever since the Pokemon craze started back in 1996-ish. But I'd never completed the Pokédex. I always used to play Pokemon Blue and Yellow. Never caught all 151, and finally did that a few years ago, and even tried to use, you can print off your the certificate for when you finish the Pokédex, and I tried to use my Game Boy printer, but the ink wasn't working very well. But I think that was definitely my most memorable gaming moment. That was one of the biggest things that I've done in gaming, for me anyway, was to finally complete that Pokédex in Pokemon Yellow. And what I had to do was I literally played through Pokemon Red, Blue and Yellow, and just traded between different Game Boys until I eventually had enough to finish the Pokédex. And it took quite a while. I'm going to say it took about 70-ish hours, but it was really, really fun, and just cool to finally do after all these years for a game that I've been playing for so long. It was great to finally finish it. So thanks, Harry, for the question, and really looking forward to having you on the podcast. Next up, we had a question from Ginger Bee Gamer, and Gingy wrote in and said, first PC game you remember playing. And I remember it very well, Gingy. It was Theme Park, and I remember we had I think the brand of PC that we had was an Acorn PC, but my brother Aidan, I literally used to think that PC contained every single bit of data in the entire world. Like, everything was contained within that PC, and you just had to figure out how to unlock it. That's what I thought, because I used to watch my brother tinker with it and think he's literally working witchcraft here, and he could pull out any game and we could play any game. And I remember playing that was it Bullfrog or Ocean Maid Theme Park. It was still one of my favourite games. I absolutely love it. It's such a great game. I have it on the SNES and play it a bit, and I can remember just playing that so much. That, and funny enough, there was a game called Madeline, which was like a little, it was a cartoon about a girl in France who went to school there or something. I can't really remember. It was like a point and click game, and I do remember playing that a lot. But definitely Theme Park was the first PC game that I ever remember playing, and I still love it to this day. It's a really, really cool game. Next up, we had and Raximus Prime 29 wrote in and said, I was gonna ask, can you both do an episode where Ocarina of Time isn't mentioned, as it's been brought up to death, and for listeners who haven't played it would be nice to hear a different point of reference. You see, I only really have one point of reference because I've played it so much and I love it so much and it's my favourite game that I can't have a different point of reference. I don't think. Maybe I'm not getting it right, but I don't know if I can promise you that because I love it so much and it's just inevitable that I'm going to talk about it. It's like Pokemon or Super Mario Bros. It's going to happen. It's going to happen at some stage. So maybe me and Keith can come up with a little challenge about Ocarina of Time. But funny enough, I was actually talking to Keith, and you might want to hear this, Raximus Prime, but I was talking to Keith and I had mentioned that I'd love to actually do an episode where we revisit that game because we discussed it so early on in the podcast. I think it was like our second or third episode, that I'd love to do it now with a little bit more experience and a little bit more structure, that I feel like we'd have a much better conversation about it. So sorry, Raximus. Thanks very much for writing in anyway, Raximus, and maybe me and Keith can play a game where we challenge ourselves to not mention it and see how that works out. But next up we have one from one of my very good friends, one of my very dear friends, John Paul, and John Paul has asked Double Dragon or Street Fighter, and that's an interesting one because they are totally different games. So Double Dragon is a side-scrolling beat-em-up kind of arcade style game, whereas Street Fighter is a fighting game, and it's very, very difficult. Like, I'm not hugely into fighting games, probably partially because I'm shit at them, but I do love Street Fighter. I love Street Fighter 2 Turbo and Street Fighter 2 because they're so hugely nostalgic for me, but I do also love Double Dragon. I think I'm going to have to go with Double Dragon because I do like the way you can play it co-op, you can play it one player, and I do like the fact that it's I feel like I can get invested a little bit more in Double Dragon as opposed to Street Fighter because, again, I am just terrible when it comes to fighting games. But thanks, Jumpy, for writing in. And then next up we have Streamer Elite, aka Alan. And Alan has asked, how much are Elnet hairspray paying you to keep that hair as pristine as you do? Well, let me tell you, Alan, they're not paying me enough. They could be paying me a little bit more. Next up we have a couple of questions here, a couple of questions in a row from Ben, aka Lasersteak, who designed our Press Any Button to Continue logo. And Ben has asked, so again, the first one, there's a couple of them here, but the first one that Ben asked was, what is my biggest collecting regret? And I wonder, what do I regret most about collecting, or what have I regretted most? I think what I've regretted most is, well, I suppose to give listeners a bit of background, that I've been collecting video games for about 10 years, and I have not an outrageously large collection, but I have a fair collection there. And what I've done in the past that I do regret is I've bought a lot of cheap games that were just as a collecting thing, because I enjoy the act of collecting. But there were games that realistically I don't think I'd ever play. And I, like, you're picking up a game for €1, €2, and you think, oh, this is a good deal. I'll get this game, but never really play it. But what I haven't done is I've never bought like really expensive games. So there's a couple of games that are really high on my list that I've always wanted. I'd love to get like a Conker's Bad Fur Day, or Final Fantasy 3, or Chrono Trigger, or a boxed Legend of Zelda on the NES. Like expensive enough games, and I've never pulled the trigger on them. But I'm sure if I've added up all the €1 and €2 over the 10 years that I've been collecting, I probably could have put them towards those games. And even though I'd have far less of a collection, I'd be totally cool with that, because I'd have these games that I've been after for so long. So I think that's definitely, yeah, I'm fairly sure that's my biggest collecting regret, that I focused more on, or not that I focused more, but I spent more on smaller games and not realising the bigger picture, when I could have been just taking that money and putting it towards bigger games and heavy hitters that are way out of my price range that I'd have to save up for. But yeah, I think that's definitely, I wonder, has anyone else done that? I'd be interested to know. The next, Ben has asked my top 5 desert island games. Now some people might like this, but number 1 on my list is Ocarina of Time. Because it's my favourite, or one of my favourite video games. My second that I'm going to pick is Super Mario Bros. 3. Third I'm going to pick is Pokemon Yellow. Fourth I'm going to pick Diddy Kong Racing. And fifth, what am I going to pick? Final Fantasy X. They're my 5 desert island games. I realise I'm going to have to bring a couple of consoles to that desert island, but hopefully I can swindle them over there. But definitely Final Fantasy X, Diddy Kong Racing, Pokemon Yellow, Ocarina of Time, and Super Mario Bros. 3 are my 5 desert island games. Next, Ben has asked, do you have an end goal for collecting? Spoiler, none of us do. I don't really have an end goal. I do have a list of things that I really, really want. Like I just mentioned, I want to get a box Conker's Bad Fur Day. I want to get Final Fantasy 3 on the Super Nintendo. I want to get Chrono Trigger. I want to get boxed Legend of Zelda on the NES. And I have a list there of a couple of things that I really want. But I'd imagine if I ever got them, which I don't think, especially the likes of a Chrono Trigger, I don't think I'll ever be able to buy. But if I did ever somehow get them, I think I'll just move on to something else. So yeah, I think you're right. There's no end goal. And then he has, my son, who's 5, recently got a present of a Switch for Christmas. He's been playing Mario Brothers and actually learned how to play really quickly. I got the Sega Classics collection and was playing some of the Mega Drive games with him. I really enjoyed it because they are games I grew up playing. In a few more years, I really want to have proper game nights with my sons. The question is, what would be one of the games you'd like your child to play on your recommendation? That's a really cool thing, I think. Getting to play games with your kids is really cool. And I so my daughter is nearly 3 and she's not playing video games as of yet, but I have a small little setup downstairs of I have an NES, an N64, Super Nintendo, I have an NES, an N64, a GameCube, and a VHS player. So I kind of have to have a small collection because I don't have a space anywhere separate to the house. And obviously having a young kid, and like if I used to have some games kind of set up on a little display, but they're drawn to them with the bright colours and cool artwork. So I've had to put everything away. But she's seen the consoles. And what she noticed one day is after we were watching the Super Mario Bros. Movie, she noticed that there was Mario in my N64. So I had a cartridge of Super Mario 64 in the N64, and she was asking me about it. So I decided to pop it on and see what she thinks. And it was very cool because I just handed her the controller and tried to, show her how to move and jump. And obviously she can't really grasp it, but it was cool to see her get that. And a couple of times since she's asked me for Mario on the N64, and it's cool to see. And I think because that was the first game that she's ever really seen, or she actually held the controller and played, I definitely think playing the likes of Mario on the N64 would be really cool. And also Pokemon Red and Blue or Yellow on the Game Boy. I think it'd be cool if we were playing them together and we could trade Pokemon together, and I think that'd be a really cool kind of bonding thing for myself and herself. So I think Super Mario 64 and Pokemon Red, Blue or Yellow, whatever one they want to play, would be really, really nice ones to play through. So that's a nice thought, actually. Next, Ben has said, I think my answer would be... sorry, Jesus, there was a gap in that. So Ben has answered. His answer would be Shadow of Colossus, showing them that even the most challenging looking things can be overcome with planning and or persistence. Either that or Red Dead Redemption. Because I want them to learn that if I'm ever either that or Red Dead Redemption, because I want them to learn that if I'm ever gunned down brutally, they need to go hunt down who did it and murder the shit out of them. That's brilliant. If you ever get mown down, Ben, I'll show them the way. I'll get the NES light gun. It's the closest thing I'll ever come to a gun. And point them in the right direction. Thanks, Ben, for the few questions there. That was really cool to go through, and cool to think of the likes of gaming in the future with my kid and stuff. And I like the top 5 desert island games. That was a good one. I might pose that as the episode question today for listeners. I know it's a question that might have been asked before, but I think it's a cool question to think of, because it's what are the games that are most important to you. So it's really, really cool. So thanks, Ben. Next up, Steamy Streamers has wrote in, my beautiful co-host, and Keith has asked, what is it like to work on a podcast with a person as tapped as Keith? Well, I can say I fucking love working on the podcast with Keith. Everyone knows, everyone who listens to the show knows that Keith brings a lot of energy and is very, very cool. Like I think I've mentioned this before, but before I knew Keith, I used to watch his stream and I was a fan of his stream. And it was only then, like we had a little bit of back and forth online, but never had like full conversations, or were never really connected. So it was all through the podcast that we have connected, and a friendship has grown as well as a podcast, and it's been really, really cool. So I love working on a podcast with Keith, who is very tapped. Thanks, Keith. Next up we have Gar, the absolute legend, and Gar has wrote in and said, finally, the Naoise Show. It's here, Gar. Keith's not actually in Japan. He's tied up. He's out in my shed. And I might let him out one day. But I might just leave him there. Gar has said, so Gar has a couple of questions here as well. And the first one he says is, or the first question from Gar is, do you have any specific memories of Pokemon Red, Blue and Yellow? For example, I remember there was a level 100 Charizard being traded around using the cloning hack. I managed to get it, but I never used it since it was named AAABCDEFGH. And it totally sucked me out of the world of being Ash Ketchum. Yeah, I can totally see that. Like me and Keith mentioned this before. You know the way when you can nickname Pokemon, I never nicknamed them because I wanted to feel like you're saying, Gar, I wanted to get immersed in the game and pretend that I was Ash. I used to, I'd always name my character Ash and I'd name my rival Gary, and because I want to get immersed in it, and the nicknames for me anyway would take me out of that. So I kind of agree. And if I think back to some of the memories, I have told a story about how my granny brought me back a copy of Pokemon Blue from America, and I didn't have a Game Boy, so I was kind of I had asked her for a Pokemon Game Boy, and she brought me back Pokemon Blue, and I didn't have a Game Boy to play it on. And I remember it being a real funny moment until I think I got my uncle's Game Boy and was able to play it. But I thought that was very funny. And then specific memories, I do remember trading and cloning. There was a guy who used to live near me called Gav, really, really sound guy, and Gav was mad into myself, and Gav I think were really two of the people around that were really mad into Pokemon, and I can remember doing a lot of trading with Gav and doing the cloning hack and stuff like that. So that was pretty cool. And then again, as I said before, I think definitely when I finally got or completed the Pokédex, that was a huge moment for me with those games. And they're games that I genuinely feel like I will be playing for the rest of my life, and I still enjoy them just as much as I did day one. They're just incredible. So they're the kind of main memories from those games. And next, Gar has asked, how has it been doing 80% online connection media? Do you sometimes wish you guys could do 100% in person? Is the energy different when you meet up? So basically what Gar's referencing there is the fact that I am in Dublin and Keith is in Cork, so we are total different ends of Ireland, and we don't record the episode in person. But we've actually never recorded an episode in person. We've done 2 live shows together, which was very, very cool. But obviously that was different because we were kind of on stage doing a show to people at a video game convention, and obviously there was a very different energy there. You know, you're trying to be kind of extra entertaining and extra lively. And then the first time I ever went down to Keith, and we did some streaming on Steamy Streamers, and we recorded some videos. That was great, but again, there was a mad energy because it was our first time ever meeting in person, and then I was actually really, really sick at the time, so it was a bit of a mad situation. So like I don't mind doing the online thing. We've very rarely had issues. I remember we did have an issue once where we had Mary Majora on for our first guest episode, and we lost the audio, and that was an issue on our end, and that was a bit shit. But thankfully Mary was a very good sport, and decided to come back on, and we did a brand new episode a couple of days later, which was great. But the online thing doesn't really bother me. Now look, it would be great if we were in person, but it's just Keith and I live about 3 hours apart, so it's not really feasible. But that being said, I am travelling down to Cork when Keith comes back from Japan, so in about 2 or 3 weeks I'm going to be travelling down to Cork, and we're gonna spend the day recording videos for YouTube, recording some podcasts, and maybe trying a bit of streaming, and maybe trying out something different, and just kind of see what we can do creatively together, because we'll be in person, and obviously we'll have his setup because he has a great setup for streaming, and it'll be really, really cool. So I'm looking forward to that. But for the most part, it doesn't bother me recording the podcast online, because we have a good setup going now where we both record our audio separately, and then Keith sends it to me, and we can kind of splice it together, and then the both of us can kind of edit the podcast and get a nice sound out of it. So yeah, I think it works pretty well. Next up from Gar has said, what are a few honourable mentions of modern games you've fallen in love with? Xbox One, PS4, PS5. I haven't played any games on the Xbox One, and I do have a PS5, but I haven't actually played any games for it. I haven't gotten any games for it yet, because I got a PS5 at Christmas time, but I've been so heavily invested in Tears of the Kingdom that I haven't actually bought a new game. So when I finish Tears of the Kingdom, I plan on getting the new Star Wars Jedi Survivor on the PS5, which will be really cool. So that'll be my first PS5 game. But as modern games go, Tears of the Kingdom I'm absolutely loving. Breath of the Wild I really, really enjoyed. On the PS4, I've played an awful lot of games on the PS4, but I think probably one of the most memorable games for me was Bloodborne, because I remember buying it. I bought it in Extravision, which is Ireland's version of Blockbuster, and I remember I brought it home and I played it, and it was so difficult that I wanted to bring it back, and they wouldn't let me bring it back because I'd only bought it an hour before, and they're like, there's no problems with this game, we can't accept it back. And so I ended up persevering and playing through it, and I kind of fell in love with it then. I really enjoyed the challenge. I loved the style of the game, the dark world that it was, the cool kind of power-ups and weapons and everything about the game. I fell in love with it. So I think definitely Bloodborne is up there with one of, if not the best PS4 game that I've ever played. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order on the PS4 was another one that I got hooked on. I absolutely love that game. I think it's so cool. And again, I cannot wait to play Star Wars Jedi Survivor on the PS5 because I love Star Wars. I love the first game, so I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into the second one. Next, Scar has asked, if you started a Let's Play or a stream, which one would you lean towards and how would you go about starting? What would be your style? I feel like you would take a lot of inspiration from Once Upon a Quest. So Once Upon a Quest, for anyone who doesn't know, is a previous guest on the podcast and a fantastic Irish YouTuber who does Let's Play videos of really, really incredible games and is currently doing an absolute mammoth playthrough of The Last of Us 2. Emma has been playing that game for an awful long time. It's very, very cool. I remember watching Until Dawn was the first ever long Let's Play series that I watched fully on YouTube. It was the first game I've ever watched fully on YouTube and absolutely loved it. So I think I'd definitely go for a Let's Play series over a stream, because anytime I'm asked this, I'm like, my answer for why don't I stream is I'm not built for streaming. I just feel like if I was having a bad day, I couldn't switch it on enough, you know. I feel like I wear my heart on my sleeve too much to be able to stream, and also a time thing. I don't think I really feel like having a consistent schedule is so important with streaming that I don't think I could do it. But I definitely would prefer to do a Let's Play style because I could have a more laid back approach. I could be more chilled, and definitely I love how Once Upon a Quest does their Let's Play videos. It's really fun and entertaining and can be quite chill at times, and I definitely think that would be the way I would go for a Let's Play style kind of YouTube series of playing like my favourite retro video games or whatever games I wanted, and have I feel like my style would be a bit of a chilled kind of cozy vibe. As you can probably tell from this episode, I know when it's me and Keith we can get a bit rambunctious and can be quite kind of high energy, but when I'm on my own, I'm definitely a bit more chilled, and that would be my style. So cool question to ask though, Gar. Thanks very much. And finally, Gar has said, is the Sega Mega Classics collection the best thing to ever happen to modern consoles? So I think not just the Sega Mega Classics, so not just the classic collections on the Sega Mega Drive or the Genesis. I think the likes of the mini consoles, so the NES Mini, the Super Nintendo Mini. I know the PlayStation 1 Mini didn't go down really well, but I enjoyed it. As the Sega Mega Mini, all those mini consoles and collections like that, I think are incredible because it just opens the door to so many people to get into retro video games or to play games from their childhood that don't have original hardware, because it's a huge investment to be buying original hardware and buying games, and if you don't have the space for them, whereas you can get these collections on your modern consoles, play them on your modern TV, not have to worry about setting them up. And I really do think that these are really cool ways for people to dip their toe into retro gaming, and if they want to get into it, or even if they want to just get a bit of nostalgia, play games from their childhood, I think they're really, really cool. So 100% Gar, I think that the classic collections and the mini consoles and all that kind of stuff is brilliant, because it's another avenue for people to get into retro. So that's all Gar's questions. Thanks very much, Gar. Really, really appreciate it. And I think we still have some more questions left. What I'm going to do is, because me and Keith are always forgetting to plug the podcast and plug our social medias and stuff, is I'm going to ask Aaron to drop in the ad reel that we've made, and then when we come back we'll read out a couple more questions. So Aaron, roll the tape. Thank you so much for listening to Press Any Button to Continue. If you would like to see more, you can find us on Instagram and X at Press Any Podcast.
Of course, if you want to catch up with our Discord, the link is in the show notes. This is primarily where we will ask you questions for future episodes and interact with our community. We do as well have a YouTube at Press Any Button to Continue, where we're currently doing a Dragon Ball Z reactionary content. Of course, as well, we do have a Patreon where you can support us directly at patreon.com/Press Any Button to Continue, where we have exclusive content and even some special stickers to send you if you sign up.
And if you like what you hear, please remember to rate, review and share the podcast, as it really helps us grow.
Now, no more diddle daddling, back to the show.
Welcome back, and before I go on, I just want to say a huge thanks to everyone who's listened to the podcast. I hope you're enjoying this episode. I know it is totally different style, just myself here, but hopefully you're enjoying this one, and thanks for everyone who's writing in all the questions. It's really, really cool to get all the listener questions in, and some really cool questions so far. So we do have a couple more left, and I'll go into them. But again, I just wanted to say thanks very much. I hope you're enjoying this style. I might do another one or two of these before Keith comes back, just to keep episodes going. So if you do enjoy the episode, please reach out, let me know. You can contact me on Instagram, Twitter, whatever way, Discord, whatever way you want. Let me know if you enjoyed it and if you'd be interested in another one, because I'm really enjoying the kind of Q&A style episode. And hopefully it'll be fun to do another one or two, or maybe even if there's any topic suggestions that you'd like me to cover, give me a shout and let me know. But thanks again, and we'll keep going. So next up we have a question from Zanfan, and Zanfan wrote in and said, this was actually a hard one since I've had the pleasure of calling you a friend for a number of years, but here's a few. As much console gaming that you've done, do you ever / have you ever been a computer gamer? If so, what games have you liked? So PC gaming, I'm assuming you mean, Chris. And yes, I don't talk about it a lot. Throughout my childhood, I was actually a huge PC gamer. I was really into gaming on the PC. And as I said before, Theme Park was the first game I ever played in the PC. And then I remember for my birthday, my older brother Aidan actually built me a custom PC. And I remember it was very cool. And playing games like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic was a huge game for me. I absolutely adored that game. But my uncle was also a big video game, or a big gamer, and was big into PC gaming and would build his own PCs, and he would always have the latest and greatest technology, and it would blow me away, the graphics on the computer. I remember him showing me Alien vs Predator, and specifically a scene where a helicopter is landing in a jungle, and it just totally blew me away. It was absolutely incredible. So Alien vs Predator was actually another one, and then Oblivion, I think, was a massive game for me on the PC. So I've played a ton of video games in the PC, but Theme Park was my first and one of my favourites. Alien vs Predator was a huge one. Knights of the Old Republic and Elder Scrolls Oblivion was a big one. But there's loads and loads of games. I absolutely, again, it's not something I talk about. I would love to do an episode on PC gaming, because there's so many that I've played throughout the years, and I really love. I've always enjoyed gaming on the PC. Oh, Max Payne, actually. I remember playing Max Payne on the PC, and just so cool. So there's loads of them there, Chris. I'd love to do a whole episode on PC gaming, because I love it. Next, Chris has said, what are your views on entombing games by getting them graded? Look, it's not for me. I think they look cool in the graded boxes, but it's just not my style. But then, each to their own. I'm not going to judge anyone for getting stuff graded. It's like, that's the way they want to collect. That's the way they want to collect. Like, I think it's cool. It's just, personally, it's not for me. I think it makes games more of a monetary thing, as opposed to something that you're collecting to play and enjoy. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but that's just kind of how I look at it, because it's more of, it's going to increase the value of it, and that's not really what gaming is about for me. So look, I've nothing against it. I think they look really cool. I don't have any graded things myself, but I think it would be cool to have a graded game. But it's just not something that I'm into at the moment. But again, my collecting styles and habits have changed drastically throughout the year, so you never know. I could somehow get into graded games. But for now, I think they're cool. They're just not for me. Next up, Chris has said, what is your guiltiest video game pleasure? What is my guiltiest video game pleasure? I really don't know. I'm not one for guilty pleasures, if I'm being honest. I kind of, if I like something, I like it. I don't particularly care what people think of it, I honestly don't know if I have a guilty pleasure. I think I like what I like, I don't like what I don't like, and that's I don't know. I'm kind of struggling. This one has me a little bit stumped, because I'm trying to think of what's my guilt, because again, I don't have it. Like, like some people, like, say, like, if it's music, I know music is a big thing for guilty pleasures, because you might be a metalhead and then love Taylor Swift. Like, I love metal. I love like Metallica. I love rock music. I love Tin Lizzy are my favourite band, but fucking Taylor Swift is cool. Harry Styles is cool, you know? I like a bit of everything. I think I like bits of everything that I don't have a guilty pleasure, because I don't feel guilty for playing video games. I'm sorry, Chris. But I'm all out of guilty pleasures, thankfully. Next, Chris has said, what video game advert, video or print had the biggest influence on you? And I think it has to be the orange South Park cart that I remember seeing advertised in a magazine when I was a kid. And I've told this story about how I went down to Golden Discs in Dunleary to buy South Park on the N64, and I asked the guy, is this the one with the orange cart, because I want to get the orange cart? And he was like, yep, that's it, that's the one, it's in the box. And I went home, and sure enough, it was the grey cart, because the orange cart was never a thing. It never happened. It was advertised in a magazine, but it never came to fruition, so there never was orange carts released. But the first person who wrote in a comment today was Harry, and Harry fulfilled my childhood dreams and sent me over a custom painted orange South Park cart there at Christmas time, and also a magazine with a copy of that ad, which is one of the most thoughtful gifts I've ever had. So that was definitely the biggest influential thing for me, or the most memorable thing for me, because it hit me so hard. It was such a big thing for me, and I can remember it so well. I can remember that day so well, and it just stays with me the whole time. And to finally have that orange cart now is actually really cool. So thanks, Harry, for sending me over that. So definitely, Chris, the orange South Park cart that was in a magazine is definitely the most influential video game advert for me anyway. And lastly, Chris has said, if I ever stop being a chicken shit and took a trip to Ireland, what sites would you recommend? Oh, there's so many. Like, I love Ireland. I think it's a beautiful country. I absolutely adore living here. I'm actually booked in with my brother, not next week, the week after, to get a tattoo of Ireland, the map of Ireland, because I love it so much. And there's so many great places. You can come to Dublin, you can see all the sights, you can go to Cork. I love Cork. Sligo, I think, is one of the most beautiful places I've been to in Ireland. You could go to Achill Island. I love Achill Island off the coast of Mayo. You could go up to Belfast. I love going up to Belfast. There's just everywhere you go in Ireland is great, I think. But if you ever do, I'll be glad to share a few pints of Guinness with you, or whatever your drink of choice is, even if it's just a coffee. That's cool with me. But I look forward to the day, Chris, and hopefully if you do ever make it up, we can meet up and share an old Guinness and a few stories about video games. But thanks very much for all those questions, Chris. I really, really appreciate it. Next, we have Teapots and Downtime. And Teapots wrote in and said, my question is, what are your favourite things from starting the podcast? Moments that have brought you joy, things that have inspired you, and stuff like that. There's been an awful lot. So we've been doing this for nearly 2 years, and it's been an incredible time. I absolutely love making the podcast. I love recording it. We have so much fun doing the podcast. Getting to do live podcasts was a really, really cool opportunity, and especially considering we're such a young podcast, we're still finding our feet and still really honing our craft, and getting to do that was a really cool moment. But I think definitely the biggest thing, and this is a bit soppy, but is the friendship that myself and Keith that has grown between myself and Keith over the last 2 years. Because again, although I was a big fan of Keith's streaming, and we'd never properly talked, and we weren't friends, we didn't chat all the time. And then when we made the podcast, we were chatting every day, and just a friendship grew there. And I consider Keith to be one of my closest and best friends now, and it's such a strong friendship to have formed in such a quick time. And that is definitely my favourite thing that has come from the podcast. And I know that sounds a bit soppy, but it's definitely true. 100%. Having that friendship with him is great. And he also got me watching Dragon Ball, which was really cool. So and I love Dragon Ball now. So but if I'm talking podcast specific, I think having something like creative that I'm proud of is really, really cool. Having the 4 seasons, 3.5 seasons, we're on to our 4th now, and having that back catalogue is something I think is really, really cool. And then having a community form around it is something that actually really took me by surprise, because although I've been a part of the retro gaming community online for years, having a community form around something that I've created or I've had a hand in creating, is something that I think is really, really cool. And I absolutely love the community of people who listen to the podcast, and the likes of all these questions that people sent in today is really, really cool. And it's just nice to get that support. I do remember when we released the first episode, I couldn't get over the huge amount of positive support from people, and it's been really, really nice to do. And I look forward to many, many years of doing more seasons and trying out different things. But I think my favourite thing has been my friendship with Keith, the community that we've created here with the podcast, and just the podcast itself. I just love doing it. I have a lot of fun doing it. And actually, another thing now, Teapots, I have to say, is learning how to record and becoming interested in audio, because I'm a real stickler for audio. Like, I love having good audio, as good as I can get with the stuff that I have. So I have a very simple podcast setup myself, but from the first episode, like, if you listen to the first episode, the mic that I use is fucking awful. It's terrible. Like, it is a mic that is just on headset. It's actually the same headset I'm using now, and it's terrible. And then after that, I remember getting a mic that was very cheap but did me for a couple of episodes, and then I have the one that I have now, which is not a very expensive mic. It's a Samsung Q2U. I think it was about €70, but I really enjoy it. And then getting, I got a little Focusrite gain booster, and then putting like I stack pillows all around me to try and dampen the sound and make the sound a little bit better, and then learning different ways in the editing process and stuff like that. I've really enjoyed that, and it's something I find really interesting, is learning about editing and audio. So that's another thing that has come. So there's loads of stuff that I love about the podcast, Teapots. So thanks very much for the question. That was a cool one to answer. And then lastly, we have another legend, Dinner Dog, on Discord, and Dinner Dog has said, boxers or briefs? I'm assuming briefs are like jocks, what would you call them? Like knickers, or not knickers, what are they called? Like white fronts. I'm boxers, man. Boxers all day. I love me some boxers. Next, Dinner Dog said, opened red sauce in the fridge or the cupboard? I like the way Dinner Dog's, he's asking the fucking serious questions here. In the fridge, Dinner Dog. Chocolate in the fridge as well. Next question is actually a chocolate question. What is my go-to chocolate bar? It's not a bar, but my go-to chocolate is Maltesers. I fucking love Maltesers. Maltesers and popcorn is the ultimate snack for me. And some fizzy pop. I absolutely love Maltesers. Next, or lastly, Dinner Dog has said, milk before or after you put the water in the tea. Now, I'm not a tea man, but I do drink a hell of a lot of coffee, an awful lot of coffee, and I put the milk in last. I'm sorry if that's not what you wanted to hear, but I put my coffee in. This is how I make my coffee. I put the coffee in, then I put a little bit of sugar in, then I put my water in, and then milk. So that's how I do it. Dinner Dog asking the heavy hitting questions. I like it, man. I like it. The behind the scenes questions. But that's it from everyone. I really appreciate everyone who has sent in messages today, sent in questions, and fucking hell, I'm nearly around an hour. I'd say once I have this edited up, it'll be close to an hour, which is really, really cool. So thanks everybody for writing in questions today. I really hope you enjoyed this style of episode. Again, I know it is totally different, but hopefully it'll keep you tied over until the dynamic duo are bad. I can't even say that properly. Until I've never talked this long on my own consistently. And usually I can get a little breather in when Keith's there. What was I even talking there? Oh yeah, the dynamic duo, me and Keith. Fuck, I'm after losing my train of thought. What was I saying? Oh yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed answering those questions. Actually, that was an awful lot of fun. So if anyone has any topic suggestions, if you'd like me to do another episode or two before Keith gets back, please do let me know. Contact me on Instagram, Twitter, Discord, whatever way you want, and let me know. And again, I really appreciate all the questions. That was really, really cool. And I'm going to leave it there. Thanks, everybody. I love you.
Land.